Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are starting a new series on error handling and debugging in C Sharp. In this tutorial, I'll explain the basics of debugging and how do we use a debugger in Visual Studio, different options available, etc. The code that I'll presenting today and all the slides will be uploaded on a GitHub, and I'll provide the link in the description below. Let me open the Visual Studio. I've already set up just a basic demo. So in order to show the how debugging can be done, now in real life situation, you wouldn't know what the error is, right? I do know ahead of time what the error is in this code. Um, I am using I'm using a nested for loop, um, and I wouldn't describe what the error is. I'll leave that to you, but I'm pretty sure most of you guys would know what the error is. So to begin with, let me open up the slides that I've prepared for this. So the important concept of how you would do debugging, there are a few terminologies that are very important to understand. Um, I guess the most important is the breakpoint. Sorry. The most important is the breakpoint. The breakpoint is essentially a point you put into the Visual Studio, and that the code of execution stops just before executing that line of code. So for example, and then easiest way to put a debug point in Visual Studio Code is you see that gray area, you come here and you click on that area and you would see essentially a dot. This what this means is once your program is running, just before when it executes this line, it would stop. So let's say I've put the debug point over here, and let's say I want to put one over here. Now there are other important terminologies which I'll go through one by one, but let's execute the code. Now, since it encountered this first debug point, you would see a yellow arrow indicating like that's the current location of the control flow. Now, once a debug is hit, there are a couple of options. How do you execute the control flow? So step into, step over, step out, continue, and stop. And the good description of what these options are, step into would let you execute the code step by step. And if there is a method call, it would go inside the body of that method. With step over, it's essentially the same as step into, except the only difference is it would not go into the method body. And another point in step into, it won't go into like if you have a Microsoft created method, it won't step into that method. With regards to step out, the if your if your control flow is inside the method, it will come out of that method. And yeah, with the continue, the program continues until it hits another breakpoint. With stop debugging, it just kills the debug mode. So I'll show all these options inside the Visual Studio now. So let's say, let me bring this window in. So if I step into, you could see this um, console dot write line was executed, and the important thing, we didn't go inside this method since this is created by Microsoft. So if this method was created by us, you would have seen that step into would let us get into this method. Yeah, so let's do step in, and then if I step in, so as you can see, the value of I is 0, value of j is 0. Now if I continue, the next time it would stop would be on the next debugging point, whatever it faces. So now let me press continue for a few times, and there's one issue I can see. I'm not able to hit this debug point. Now this is where I would like maybe start saying like what's the issue in the code. And the reason is I am incrementing the value of I instead of j. Now there are a few other things which I like to mention. If you hover over your cursor, you would see the value of the variable at that instance. So the value of I is 6. If I hover over j, it's still 0. So that's a bit concerning, like why the value of j is not incremented. The reason simply is because we're not incrementing it at all. So that's the debugging part of it. And if I want to kill the debugger, I can just stop debugging and then that just kills the program. One other thing I just maybe highlight is if I run this back again, and let's say we have the like let's say if I continue this for a while, so as you can see the value of I is increasing and we're not incrementing the value of j. um, let's say if if I do step into it, it's going through this loop again and again. Let's say I want to break this loop, and what I can do is manually come here, and in this window what I can do is assign the value of j. Let's say if I make it 10, right? Now this will come into effect, and if you see now the value of j is 10 because I've assigned it over here. This condition would fail and it would come out of this loop, right? So as you can see, this for loop, the control got exit from this for loop. And the other thing you can see is now we're not having a j variable over here because the scope of this j variable was only limited to this selected area. So if I now, stop the debugger, I know what the error is, and I mean, this was very basic error, but the idea was just to explain how to debug the application, how debugger works. So if I think I have, yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'll put all the content on the GitHub. The link will be provided in the description below. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you like the content.